So good evening, everyone. On behalf of the library board and the staff, welcome to this community listening session on the library's capital improvement project. I'm Catherine Lemmer, I'm the library director, and we are so very pleased that you took the time to come tonight and provide us with your thoughts and insights on library services. As many of you know, the opportunity to restore, renovate, and expand the original 1931 building to enable it to serve future generations is a great honor and responsibility. It is a responsibility that the library board and staff have taken very seriously over the last few years. So before we get started, I'll just give you a little tech help. The meeting's recorded. Everyone came in on mute. We're going to have a short presentation by the library board and HGA this evening. So we're going to ask that you add your questions to the chat. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session where you can either put your questions in chat, use the reaction. If you are more comfortable with Zoom, you can use that feature, or just raise your hand and we're going to watch all of those options and call on people. We ask that you introduce yourself and that you just keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, just so we want to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. So, as I said, the purpose of this session is to really learn the community's preferences with respect to library needs, wants, desires. So before we get started, I wanted to take a few minutes to get everybody to the same page. So the library board's been working on this very complex project for almost 5 years. Over the course of that, we looked at lots of options, put some to the side, move some forward. Sometimes things happen and we had to go back and rethink things because lot lines changed, or thinking about libraries, or a COVID pandemic came and made us read differently about a public building. So given that this is a very complex project and that there's a lot of passion surrounding the library building, it is really not surprising that there's a lot of misinformation out in the public. So I wanted to make our time tonight, it's short, so I wanted to make it very valuable. And I thought I would just take a few minutes to just talk about what's fact versus fiction right now. So I just picked a couple of things that people call me about, and usually we have a conversation and then we can still disagree or agree, but at least the person's not frustrated or upset about something they've heard in the library. So here's the first one. Some fictions regarding the original building, right? The original building's not going to be used for library services. The original front entrance is going to be abandoned. The front lawn is going to be made into a parking lot with a driveway in the front. And I just want to reassure you, that is not anywhere on the spectrum of what will happen. The library plans to use every single inch of the 1931 building. We have to. We're so space challenged that even with an expansion, we will flex and put into use every bit of the building. So we're going to put some technology and refresh some of the spaces, but we're going to use them. The historic front walk is going to be put back in, and we're going to refurbish those original courtyards. We're going to increase the parking, but it's going to be done on the road ring, right? So I just wanted to show you this because I know this image on the left has been circulating today and everyone loves it, right? Well, what we're planning to do is restore that walk that's no longer there. So you see it just on this kind of visual next to that. And I went back and I was reading from the Tribune. There were articles about when the library opened. And one of the things that was really important back then is that there were 2 walled gardens. And in the summer, they were used for reading rooms. And we're bringing that back. So please, for those who have concerns, be reassured that the building is being respected and will be used. The other thing that comes up a lot is meeting rooms. And I just want to reassure everyone, we are not going into competition with Marriott or Hilton. We are not building a suite of conference rooms. We're also not building an elegant reception space or a catering kitchen or an auditorium. Those spaces are provided by other partner organizations in the Lake Forest area. What we do have right now is we have one small room used to be my office, and we converted it into a small meeting room for adults so that they would have a lovely place to have a book discussion, not have to go down into the children's room. And we have a larger meeting room in the children's room that has a capacity of 130. So what we'd like to do is talk about adding a small wet sink for cleanup in the larger room and expanding it to 150 capacity and making it dividable. So that part of the day when we're so busy from 3 to 6, and we can spread all our tutors out in there. Maybe they'll take up half the room, maybe they won't, but it just gives us a little more flexibility to also have something going on in that space. We would also like to add furniture storage so that when we do have a meeting in the room next to my office, all the excess furniture doesn't come into here, right? And what's really important is we want to add hearing impairment technology to both spaces. So that's when we talk about what we're going to do with meeting rooms. That's what we're talking about. And if space and budget permit, we'd like to add 4 small 2 to 4 rooms because we get a lot of requests for those. People may be taking an exam or an interview, or they want to interview a caretaker. So we've gotten a lot of requests for that kind of space. So if we can add it, we will. And then if there's space to squeeze in another small meeting room for office use, we've reduced all of our staff offices in the new plan. So we would like to have a small meeting room available for that or someone to use in the community. Another fact versus fiction is on the size of the expansion. And this is often what I hear. The library is building a 20,000 square foot glass box on the back. So the facts around it is the library would like to increase its square footage by 10,000 square feet. We'd like to go from 29,000 to about 30,000, of which 8,400 square feet is still for our collection. We're not getting rid of books. What our goal is to place them on shelving of a height that children can engage with them. Book bins, for example, our large print books are on 8.5 high shelving, 90. So we'd like to bring those down so our seniors can actually reach the books off the shelf without a step stool or things like that. So it's all very, everything is a piece of the same pie. The proposed North Edition is not a glass box. Not really sure how that all evolved into a discussion piece, but what the library board said to the architects is that we need to be educated. We would like to be educated. Show us a spectrum. So we saw everything from slate roofed gables to glass to underground to whatever. And the library board made choices saying, that's not appropriate for Lake Forest, or that's not gonna work because of the water tables. All of these things were discussed, but at this point, we're working on library services and the spaces and needs of that. And then we move to talking about how it all gets positioned and put together on the outside. Right now, we're contemplating the removal of the east and west wings. And why? Because they have a lot of infrastructure issues. We estimate right now it's more cost prohibitive to rehabilitate them. Plus, if we take them off, we achieve some really important historic preservation goals. We take them off, the original building pops, we get the access to those original courtyards back. So that is a very strong contender right now. Of course, if we lose that much square footage in a space challenge situation, we have to pick it up somewhere else. Right now, we're looking to pick that up in our new North Edition. So again, my goal with all of that information is to really let people know that I want you to be happy about the library. So when people call me and they're upset, or they email me and they're upset, I just don't think that's a good place for people to be, because the library is really important in a lot of lives. And I just want to reassure everyone that we are very conscientious in how we are thinking about this project. We have a whole bunch of information on our website. We have this guide that has so much information. It has a table of contents. So if you go to the Capital Improvement Project, you can register for a tour. I love giving tours of the library. So tell me you want a tour and I'll walk you through everything we're doing. If you'd like, you can register to learn more about any engagement opportunities and just read lots of information about what we're planning to do. And this is just on our library website. So a couple of next steps. So we have listening sessions tonight and then next week. You're more than welcome to come back. We're going to do a community survey at the end of the sessions to sort of reaffirm what we're hearing or dispel or, validate what's all being said to us. That'll come at the end of April. So watch your email. It'll be announced in the city newsletter everywhere. And if you don't hear about it, call us and we'll get you it. We are planning a presentation to City Council in May. And again, if you want a tour of the building, let me know and be happy to provide that. So again, I just want to really thank you for coming tonight. I know everyone has so many things going on in their lives, and for you to take the time to participate in this very valuable project, your time is very much appreciated. I'm going to turn the program over to Victor Pachetti and Jane Dietering of HGA. They are our architects. We have been working with them for 4.5 years. They're going to start with a short presentation. And again, you can put your questions in chat or hold them until the end. And then we're going to have a very interactive question and answer session. So thank you so much.
Oh, Catherine, have you, there we go, I can share now. Thank you. Okay, quick audio visual check. Can everybody hear me and can everybody see a welcome screen? Great, thank you. Well, I just want to say hello and welcome on behalf of HGA. I'm Victor Pachetti, an architect with HGA. Also with us this evening, Jane Dietering, who is a principal with HGA and our National Library Planning and Design leader. Also with us, Melissa Stone, who is recording the proceedings tonight, and Nick Janik, our trusted technologist, who's making sure that our technology stays up and running. So thank you for coming and spending the evening with us. The first thing we're going to do is share, while summarial, a summary of the entire process that we have undergone with the library to date. Our firm began partnering with the library in 2018 to complete a feasibility study, of which I'll share a summary, and then restarted in 2020 on what we would call a pre-design phase. I'd like to reiterate at the very beginning that there is not a proposed building design on the table at this juncture. An emphasis on the work that's been done is a feasibility study and pre-design work. And while you will see design explorations, that is our way to ask questions, and as Catherine mentioned, look at all kinds of opportunities of how a building could lay out on the site. The true design process of a building has not yet begun. So we want to share progress to date with you, and then hope to focus a conversation this evening on a vision for library services, programs, welcome, feel, etc. So the slide that you see in front of you is just a collection of chapter covers for the feasibility study that was completed in 2018. This is about a 100-page document, all told, and it studied numerous things to provide an informed foundation for work at the library. HGA has a historic preservation expertise, and our lead historic architect, Ginny Lakovic, provided much of the research for this report, including a historical survey of the narrative of how the project came to be, how it was designed, in what style, and what areas are to be most protected. The physical description, there was a meticulous analysis of everything from holistic issues that might be occurring to the building. A prime example is the dome that remains wrapped to prevent leakage, down to various detailed brick and stone cracks. So there's a complete survey around the building of which elements would need restorative care to bring the building back to its original glory. A collective of engineers went through the building, mechanical, electrical, structural, and plumbing, looking above ceilings and behind walls to be able to assess on a technical level a number of the engineering infrastructural issues that need to be remedied in the building. The chapter that says treatment recommendations, for those of you that may be familiar with the Department of Interior Historic Preservation Guidelines, our historian diagrammed the building in order to document exactly which areas, which is the majority of the historic building, ought to be restored and preserved with no change and no modification to the original character. Of course, the building has been expanded. Catherine mentioned the east and west wings, as well as an addition on the north side that are not part of the historical fabric of the building and would be proposed to be removed. There's a chapter there called Design Studies, and I'll share with you a collage of what that meant in the feasibility study. Design study meant that the team looked at multiple alternatives of scope and level of work in and around the existing building. In the upper left, where you see the wrench, that suggests the minimal work is asset preservation. Fix what's broken. There's lots of problems with electrical, mechanical, cracking. That is the minimal option, is to repair things that are just not working or broken. In the lower right, you see a placeholder image of a new building. If you bookend the first option, it's to construct a new facility, perhaps on a different site. Then there were multiple options at different levels of renovation and expansion between. The reason that these alternatives need to be looked at, they become the foundation to help budget the project. There isn't a design or an aesthetic on the table, but to understand which areas need to be restored and preserved, which areas may be remodeled, and which areas may be new, help establish and vet construction budgets for the project. Early in 2020, there was a programming process by a library programming consultant, Penelope Hummel. This is a cover of that report. This report was based on extensive interviews with library staff, leaders, those who engage with patrons every day and lead the library programming. They know what patrons have been asking for, what's working and not working. Those interviews and an analysis of the existing building led to a building space program. This is the document that lists how many square feet devoted to which section of the library, how much shelving, shelving heights, as Catherine was mentioning, to make those more accessible. So this was a document that laid out the programmatic needs and improvements within the building. Then attention turned to site planning. It is a limited site, as you all know who have been on site and been to the building. So outlining the site boundary and assessing where expansions could take place was part of this site fit planning study. In the image on the left, you see a small green box. That's an area of property that is slated to be conveyed to the library site from the development to the north. It's not a large parcel, but every little bit helps in helping to allow space for expansion and circulation around the building. In the image on the right, you see a white outline in the upper right corner. That's not necessarily a building footprint, but it establishes a zone within the property of where building expansion could occur. Now, there's lots of green that you see on the site. To affirm an earlier point that Catherine made, there are no options that look at expanding the building anywhere else other than to the north as a way to preserve, as a matter of fact, restore the experience of the historic building from the south and the east and the west. This collective of images shows 11 different design explorations that have been done in this pre-design phase to date. Some of these you all have seen. They've been out on social media and other places. So this is a great place to reinforce the fact versus fiction discussion. We set out to study different shapes, masses, combinations of materials that could be accommodated on this site. If you look closely among these images, you will see the glass box option. That was presented at one particular board meeting along with 3 other options and was rejected by the library board at that particular meeting. So as Catherine mentioned, there has been and is a misperception. That was an alternative among 11 that was immediately dismissed. It wasn't even something that our team was advocating, but in the spirit of looking at every alternative possible, that was one of the alternatives. I do want to call your attention to the 2 images at the bottom of the screen. Those were the most recent design studies, and those were done in preparation for meetings with an ad hoc advisory committee that the City of Lake Forest helped assemble, in which it allowed the library team to share early concepts with a group comprised of members of the Preservation Foundation, and the Historic Preservation Commission. At the library's request, this committee came together. So before there was a true building design process, ideas could be tested, shared with that committee, and assess reaction of where the historic direction may go. The team received a strident critique, to be sure. The option on the lower right was presented first and received critique that that option would not be approved through the HPC process. The option on the lower left presented a step towards a more traditional approach. The reaction was perhaps on the right track. That is still not an option that would be approved. At this juncture, since a building is not being designed, that information and that feedback is archived away. And at a point when building design does begin, full compliance and collaboration with the HPC to create a building design that is sympathetic and honors the legacy of the historic structure is the commitment of the library team and the design team. There have been some interior renderings that have been explored. At the very top, you see 2 images that modify nothing about the existing building other than decluttering historic spaces from things like copiers and repositories for other equipment to restore those spaces to their originally intended historic character. Then there were other images created to explore the volume, the space, the mood of other places in the building. Again, we wanted to share with you what has been done. This is all under the umbrella of pre-design, pending a design process to begin the building. So at this juncture, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Jane, who is going to walk us through some of the library experiences, services, and programs that we hope we can sponsor some discussion about this evening and hear what resonates or does not resonate with the community. Jane?
Thank you, Victor. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Dietering, and I have had the privilege of continuing to work on this project for the last 4.5 years with HGA and the library team of Lake Forest. I think what we want to start with is to set the stage in terms of understanding how libraries are similar and yet how libraries are different, how libraries are evolving in terms of what they're being asked to do. But while the core mission always still remains the book, the reading, the sense of place, and how each library that's designed needs to express the unique library experience that's appropriate for that community. And so while Lake Forest, what we've come to learn is, or I should not say learn, we've come to know that Lake Forest is very, very unique. You have a very unique building that really is a treasure. And most libraries today don't have that. They've either moved away from it or they've realized they can't invest what it might require. And so you don't see many buildings like this. So in the images that you're going to see from us, please keep in mind, these are not images of buildings that we would suggest for Lake Forest. The Lake Forest Library has to be rooted in what you have today. But what's important to know is that these are going to be spaces or examples of how libraries are being used that would apply in certain degrees for Lake Forest. And what we'd like to know tonight is we'd like to talk with you to find out, how do you want to use this unique library? What things would you like to say about the library, or how would you like to use it that maybe we don't have the ability to do today? But first, what I want to do is show you just a little bit. From 1931 to now, the library's changed a lot. And what it's, like we said, what it's asked to do. And you think about, it was probably in one language. How many books today are in multiple languages and multiple formats? And all of that takes just a little bit more space. So the first thing I want to show you is what we call the marketplace. Now, I've heard that that marketplace term isn't necessarily something that everyone is comfortable with. And so whatever we call the space isn't important. What we want to think about in that marketplace is functions that somebody comes to the library and says, I really just need to run an errand. I want to come in, I want to pick up my holds, I want to check them out, and I want to go. I don't want to chat with anybody. And so there's this kind of self-directed experience. But what's most important is usually that's near the front door because people just want to run in. But what's most important before they run in is, what does it look like? When you walk in and you experience that first moment in the library, is there a person that greets you? Is there an ease of understanding? Is there, so for instance, when you look at this space, you know that there's daylight way at the end, which tells you there's a destination of some sort. Most importantly, there's a place to rest. If you're elderly and you've had a long walk already from a parking lot, you can sit down. You could sit down and meet somebody if you ran into them to talk, or you could just sit down and wait for someone. You walk in, there's a person to help you. If you want service, there's service right there and convenient. We know concierge service is very important in Lake Forest, and this is the type of experience that might support that. We also know that there's self-checks and reserves and other types of support services that again need to be near the front door. This is a historic department store. Now, again, this has not been treasured like your library has, but when we worked on this library, we were able to preserve the plaster capitals. When we took away all the things that had been added, there really were treasures of display windows and historic detailing and terrazzo floors. But again, it was understanding that entry experience that gives you convenience, but also gives you the sense of history that this library was able to represent. Now, this is a very different library. This is a library that's designed to be in conjunction with an office building. So there's 2 floors of library, but what's important here is that this entry experience continues to say, there's a person, there's someone to help me. And oh gosh, I see the stair, which means I know adult collections upstairs. I'm going to go upstairs. If I look to the left, we've got the returns. That makes returning my materials very convenient. Of course, I can take them to the desk, but I can drop them off. Around the corner is the reserves, and straight in front of me where my children are going to go and run right toward that children's area. All of those things happen at these front doors. Something to keep in mind also is when you renovate a library, that's how renovate or build new, a library that is heavily used, you are going to see a sustained increase of about 30% over the amount of circulation and usage that you currently have. If you built new and your library wasn't used, you could expect 50% sustained increase in your utilization. What that means is that although these spaces near the entry look like they're really spacious, you have a lot of people coming and going with different abilities. You have families, you've got strollers, you have all people crossing traffic, and all of those things need just a little bit of space. And ideally, we're able to then add some pop-up displays as well, so that we have the ability to continue to display things in your wonderful rotunda. Just imagine, you'd be able to still recreate those shelves along the perimeter for new materials. The copier will move that out of the way so that, again, we can restore the grandeur of the rotunda that you currently have. So think about that as your entry experience. We want to think about what children do in a library today. Children, obviously, we've all come to know that since 1931, there's a huge priority in how children learn. And what we've learned is that there's interactivity that is important to how children learn. There's an essence of play. There are very important children's educational programs that need to happen in a library. And so libraries today in children's areas, you start to see a little bit more floor space for some of that activity and pop-up. And again, what we call, the strollers. Often near a library, children's area, you're going to see a flexible room similar to your Casian room. This is a room where they've got big sliding glass partitions and it opens so that that can be overflow space for usage while there's no program happening there. It still doesn't sit empty. And that's something that's really important, is we want to make sure every aspect of this building is used. Whether they're small intimate spaces or whether there are small little reading spaces, we know children learn in a lot of different ways, and we would want to be respectful of all of those different ways to learn in your new and expanded children's area. Imagine teens and young adults have been on the forefront of libraries now for about the last 10 or 15 years, but they weren't in 1931. What you're going to notice with most of these library collection areas is not only dedicated teen computers and spaces for a little bit more noise that sometimes happens with teens, but also the small collaboration rooms that you can see over on the left. We're going to point those out in several different areas of these images because they used to be called study rooms. Oftentimes we call them now project rooms or collaboration rooms because teens are working in teams at school. And it's important for them to have those support services here at the library as well. The next image is something that what's important also is that teens are always supervised. So while that image might have this interesting hexagon pattern, it was very intentional that although the teens inside feel like they've got some separation, everybody knows exactly what's happening in that teen space. So again, it's those simple details that create spaces unique for the personalities of different age groups and makes everyone feel that they have a place that they own in the library and their very personal experience. Oh yes, this is about imagination. We think about spaces that have studios and we're not suggesting a recording studio. We're just suggesting that children and teens use spaces in ways that we could never imagine. And this is literally what happened in that library in Virginia where the local band thought they should record their music video on the stair. So we have had all kinds of unusual things happen in these libraries. So what we plan and what happens is so exciting to see how they're actually a part of the community. Let's not forget adults. Adults are very important to the collection that you have, those magnificent reading rooms that you have. We've learned that those rooms we try to preserve them when we talk about removing the wings on the building, what that does is it actually kind of restores those reading rooms to the way they were intended, where people were not passing through them anymore to get to an art collection. They're just a destination of its own around the fireplace. So while you had the fireplace in 1931, everyone still wants fireplaces. And so we try to add them. People still want to gather around the fireplace. You can see that here. Again, you can see more of those small meeting rooms to the left, or excuse me, to the right of this. You also get a sense of sight lines. So people can see that yellow box in the back and understand that that's a children's space. There are sight lines for staff to see who might need assistance. There's sight lines for people to be able to meet their friends. There's sight lines for people who maybe speak different languages that also make it easier for people to use this library or any library. Again, libraries are thinking about how do we bring people together? And you have some of those tables already. How this community chose to bring people together was through geography in the map that you see beyond, in their interest in public art, but also very much in that community table that you see in the front. Now, I'm not suggesting a large picnic table for Lake Forest in any way, but the concept is you bring people together where someone would sit there and spread out a newspaper, and maybe someone they don't know sits down and they begin to have a conversation. So it's about bringing people together where people want to have that social interaction, and libraries are really a place where people come to socialize. This is a small library we did in Egg Harbor. You may have been there. Again, they really wanted it rooted in the community, but they wanted it to be community center first and library. So it's a very much of a balance of both of those uses, but again, a very different aesthetic based on what that community wanted. And I hope those help show that the personality comes through in the place and not so much dictated, but what we think is appropriate for the community. Let's take a quick look at program rooms, technologies, creative spaces. Again, these were probably not in the original library, but what you can see here again is that those program rooms where libraries are delivering services have that need to be opened up. This is that historic department store. So that was the display window. We want to put people and programs on the forefront at the street frontage so people really can imagine what's happening in the library and understand how different it is from what they might have envisioned earlier. If we look at the next slide, a more traditional meeting room, but again, it opens up to that children's area. So this room is flexible, but it's much warmer. And we have introduced a wood character. That's an example of a sink and a cleanup area so that the room can be a little messy, but the cleanup can happen easily, or you could have coffee and you could serve that without an elaborate kitchen of any kind. Here again, it's the importance of views to the outside and natural light and thinking about computers in a way where if you're using your computer, you can look out and you can stretch your eyes. Sometimes you think computers are cold spaces, but they don't have to be. And this is that example of where you can use computers in a quiet environment that's very reflective and a place that people want to spend time and not feel cold. Again, a renovation that we did, again, computers close to a desk, showing what we're finding is computers need quiet computers and you need social computers now, because think of all the times you might need a computer, or someone might, where they're on the phone with customer service. And that's the way they have to be on the phone while they're using a computer. So we're starting to see separation of noisy, computers and quiet computers. This is what they call the iLab. We think about creative spaces. Many people talk about maker spaces or studio spaces, but regardless of what creativity is happening, for instance, you have a media lab. That is a highly used creative space, while other labs are flexible and enable people to learn together around an activity of doing. Much like children learn through doing, everybody learns through doing. So if we have these creative, flexible spaces where people can do together, it's a good way to cross barriers of language and education and bring people together of differing interests, or around a common interest, excuse me. And then lastly, quick, we'll show you these collaborative spaces. Again, these are spaces where you've got a row of those small study rooms for 1, 2 people or 4 people where they can work together around technology or not around technology. Usually there's technology nearby, but it's really a popular item that the conversation goes inside those rooms and helps keep your library quieter. Again, conference rooms, whether it's 8 people or 12 people, book club rooms, again, always good sight lines, natural light, supported by technology, and another place to support a very different user need. We want people to come to the library and have whatever need they have for that day met within the context of one building. Again, this is a more social library. So you're seeing that collaboration is happening in general in this open space. Again, a library that had a downtown location. And in this case, it wasn't a redeeming building and they chose to rebuild, but maintaining that history on the site was so important to the system. And in this case, it was, has really increased their usage quite a bit. And this is a group that decided to put a collaboration table surrounded by collaboration rooms right in the entry. So it's a real place for people to come and meet and display their creative work and have different ways to work around technology, but really in the entry area. Most importantly, it's about making your library memorable, making your library experience memorable. In this case, it's an entry that if you look closely at that sign, it's made up of all the local authors' names. So when you look at it, it's about place and it's not like any other place. You can see the brick pattern was reminiscent of books on a shelf. So there's a level of detail and care that makes buildings memorable. It's about making a shadow and a building that's transparent in a way that people can see the new activities that are happening, but can also reminisce about the things that they enjoy most that are still there. And so it really is important that we find that balance of what's important to maintain and what's important to help bring new people in. But again, I hope you can see that it's attention to detail, attention to your stories, and understanding what it is that is important for the vision of Lake Forest. And we can put it in a lot of different building types, but in this case, we would be entrusted with this very cherished building, which as you can see is very unlike anyone else's. So with that said, we'd like to move into the true listening, where it's your turn to tell us everything that you came to tell us, because that's what we want to know. We do have a series of 4 questions that we'd like to ask. We're asking all the groups the same questions, but feel free to make sure and tell us what you want us to hear as well. The first question, we're going to run through all 4. I want to tell you, what we're looking at. So you can either save your questions or your answers, or just respond to whichever question you choose. But let's start with the first one. Imagine the new library that Lake Forest deserves. What does it offer? How does it enrich lives? The second question is, what current library services, collections, programs, and areas do you use and enjoy most? Importantly, also, what's missing? What makes you feel welcome at the library? What would improve your experience? And can you easily access everything at the library? And the last question is, in addition to books, how can the library best support you in lifelong learning, including access to new technologies? So that gives you an overview of the questions that we would like to get your thoughts on this evening. And let's go back to the first one. Imagining this new or renovated library, we should focus on being renewed, not new, but renewed, that Lake Forest deserves. What does it offer and how does it enrich lives? Think about libraries as you travel. Which libraries are really compelling to you, or what are your friends telling you that others are offering? Tell us what you think about how your library enriches your life, or what you'd like it to offer.
Is this for open discussion, or are we answering in chat?
Oh, no, Oh, thank you for asking. Please raise your hand, offer for discussion. Would you like to go first?
Well, I suppose I've put myself out there.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm Yvonne Bruce and I'm on the local Ward 1 caucus, and we spent all summer interviewing new board members for the library, and I thought I should gin up as to know what was going on at the library to see what types of candidates we should place on there. And I suppose there's a lot that I have been misled on as well, because you hear chatter, and as everybody knows, everybody is satisfied with chatter today without actually digging down into the facts. So firstly, I'd like to thank Victor and Jane and Melissa and Nick for coming and giving more of your time today to try and demystify what lies in fate with our library. So I suppose, what am I answering? What does the library, let me get this chat out of the way. Imagine the new library that Lake Forest deserves. You know, it's difficult because I'm a 47-year-old body, but I have a 97-year-old mind. And I love the library as it stands. I've seen many iterations of rehabbing of country clubs that were absolutely beautiful, that had real materials when you walked into them. And then somebody had a great idea. Somebody on the board was an architect, with full due respect, or an interior designer, and then everything was rehashed, and then you were left with veneer that just didn't have the lasting quality that Lake Forest Library does have now. So if anything, I think Lake Forest Library deserves, and by the way, your photographs of the library with the authors hidden in the library, and also the book design is fantastic, but it reminds me a little bit of when I was running a birthday party for my kids, and we had a theme of, let's say, unicorns, and I got everything unicorn down to like the glitter that went on the tables, and nobody noticed it. You know, everybody's running around opening presents. You know, we notice it because we drilled that down into that granular phase. We need to look and see what everybody sees, you know, straight away, and depth of materials used, and a little bit of space. And actually, I like the mystery of Lake Forest Library, and that's all. You've gotten enough from me for a while, but that's kind of what first hits me when me and my family moved up here. Lake Forest Library is where I met people, and it is a very anchoring building for me. So that's my 2 cents worth. I think you probably have some questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I might just expand a little bit of how to plug in here to make sure you know what all the options are. You know, Nick is running our technology here, so you can turn on your camera and raise your hand and wave if you're comfortable doing that. You can click on the raise hand icon if you would like to do that, or you can in fact contribute in the chat. And once in a while, I'll jump in and read what people are sharing in the chat to make sure that's part of the conversation. So however you're comfortable, we want this to be as accessible as possible. Raise your hand digitally, raise your hand analog, or plug into the chat.
And Victor, it does look like we have a few comments in the chat if you want to review those while others are thinking of their questions.
Yes, I've got a comment here from Mary that says, is there actually enough space in the current space to do all the things the, in quotes, new library could do? And I'll read the second comment, and then Catherine, I'll pass on the is there enough space question to you. The second comment from Kelly Rappaport, please can you add a maker's lab with a 3D printer and other tools machines? This is a great STEM activity and has been a trend of other libraries in the area. This guaranteed would keep my family visiting the library often for years to come. So Catherine, you want to take the first question? Is there enough space in the current space to do all the things the new library could do?
In our current space, no. As we start to envision what we would like to do. One of the board members said very early on when we started talking about this process is, you guys are doing such great work. You're doing so much work, and the building fights you at all junctures. I mean, something as simple as if we want to have a program in the what we call the read room, which used to be my office, and it accommodates 12 people comfortably around tables. Where do we put all the rest of the tables and the rest of the chairs, right? It all backs up into my office or the hallway. And it's not that that's horrible. It's just not very effective, right? And we want to be a library that when we host a program or a book discussion or a children's afternoon project, every child, despite their physical or other challenges, can make it into the library. So we have about 30 to 40% of our library that is not available to people in wheelchairs. And the collection is a service. And so if individuals can't get to that service, we don't have enough space in our building to do all the great things that we do.
All right. Anyone else right now? We can move on to the next question. See if that spurs some conversation. What current library services, collections, programs, and areas do you use and enjoy most? It's really important for us to know, what are the favorite places? Again, because we want to make sure we're preserving as much as everybody loves. And what's missing? We want to make sure that we're making room for the things that are missing as well. Any suggestions here? There's a comment in the chat. Oh, go ahead. I'm stepping on you, Victor.
Says, I like all periodicals and range of books.
Well, rest assured, we know we're going to have a lot of books. Anything else? There must be programs or activities, or do you just want to come and have a great place to sit in the rotunda or in the foyer? Does that feel appealing?
I think Mary has a question there.
Yeah, I really like everything. Once Corona's back, I do hope to get back into the technology lab and work with the things we have to make photographs into technology. And I need to take more classes in technology because that's the way information is coming to us, and I feel like I'm missing out. So in saying I know we don't have enough space where we are right now, I'm wondering if even building out will have enough space. Like I'm wondering, I wish we could have more space than even being able to build out, because I know there's not enough parking there, and we'd have to park. We're still going to have to park across the street to have enough parking and to have all the great things that I think could be there and other cities have. I don't know if we even with the addition we're making, if it's going to be enough room there. So I guess I wish the city were more supportive of the library and would give us more space. I mean, because I don't really know how the budgeting goes between the library, the city owning the library building, and then the library having its own budget. It seems like we need to use the city's parking lots across the street. And then we really need more spaces. And it's like, it'd almost be nice to have the library where the city hall is. I mean, they have a nice building. It's probably not the right location, and have that nice building for all of the community. And so I'm wondering, are we even going to have enough space with what we're going to do, building out as much as we can? because I love all the programs, but you know, I'm interested in expanding the technology, because I don't think that space is big enough for the kind of classes we need and the things people want to be doing.
I think, Mary, one of the things we thought very carefully about was making spaces function for more than one thing. And by that, you know, the quiet reading room is for those that want to read newspapers in the morning and study in the afternoon. And if we updated with newer and more flexible furniture, we can have a book discussion around the fireplace in the evening. All of the spaces that we thought about, the spaces that we're adding are things that can be used in multiple ways. Simple things like in the children's room, you know, HGA has been so helpful in providing us with all this information. Like you can put some of the bookshelves on rollers, right? So you need a little more space, you roll them out of the way, you have your children's story time, you roll them back. And that's very common. So we've been trying to be very creative because we know we're on a landlocked site, and we don't want to not deliver everything the community wants. But it's a tight fit, no questions asked.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll plug in a few more comments from the chat here. From Thea M. Here's what I'd like to see: 3D printers and laser cutters as part of a maker's lab, a drive-through window for pickup and drop-off of books, 3D printed objects, tech rentals, etc. Thanks for your consideration. Ms. Bruce, please forgive me if I don't get your first name correct. I'm going to say Ciaran Bruce.
I hijacked my son's computer. That's Kieran. It's an Irish name. That's a boy. My name's Yvonne. Much easier.
Yvonne.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. Yvonne Bruce says, I also get audiobooks. And a little further down, kids take tutoring there. And then from Ellen Peter, I love the historic feel of the present library. However, when I need multiple services, I tend to visit a newer library. And from David Borash, I enjoy reading in the open courtyards in the summer. And Ms. Bruce, David, thank you. Where are you accessing the courtyards? Have never seen anyone, admittedly. Then David says, I access them from the front outside walk. Through the gates is how I access them. And I might add that one of the many alternatives being explored, as Catherine mentioned, is the removal of the 1970s vintage east and west wings, which would help restore the courtyards to the original intent of Edwin Clark, the architect. It would also provide a little bit of breathing space on the site. Mary, there won't be a lot of parking added on the site, but by removing some of those east-west wings, we are able to achieve some extra parking capacity on site.
All right. Anyone else like to make a comment? All right. Let's go to the next question. What makes you feel welcome at the library? Is there anything that would improve your experience there? And can you access everything at the library? Any comments about welcome or what would improve your experience? Any thoughts? All right, maybe the next question. Let's try that. In addition to books, how can the library best support you in lifelong learning, including access to new technologies? We've talked a little bit about new technologies. How can the library support you in lifelong learning? Any comments there?
I'll just say, because I just happen to know how to unmute myself on this call, that it's difficult because I am such a visual learner, and any neuropsychiatrist will tell you that there's a certain segment of people that once things are filed away in a computer, they seem to disappear. Some of us have problems with object permanence or something, but I'm a very tangential visual person. So I do need to have, you know, something that I can tactile pick up. I'm a very paper oriented person. So far, you know, I like the books, and I'm not transferred over to a fully digitized person. So while I hear about the tech and the Makers Lab, I'd be a lot more interested in 3D printers than, you know, sort of disappearing into the stratosphere. Everything going digital kind of like scares me as a learner. And I have a couple of kids who kind of have the same profile. That's just my thought.
Thank you very much.
And I think Heather has her hand raised.
One thing that when we're envisioning the new library that is a little bit challenging is when I visit, I tend to come with other family members, and we'll go through the front and we'll split up and we'll go different ways. And it's the way the circulation works, it's hard to meet back up. That I think we need both a landmark size, something like the circulation desks or something like that to say, I'll meet you here, but clear kind of visual things that if there's a level change, they come up the stairs, they see the desk, they know I'm gonna be there. And likewise, if I arrive a little earlier or vice versa, I've checked my books out, I can sit on a bench or something and not be waiting too long. I feel like now I'm sort of in a hamster wheel where with the way that stairs are in the half levels that we kind of chase each other around a lot when we're meeting up. So clear circulation, and especially for the children, because the library is sort of a rite of passage. I know it's the very first place that my children rode to on their bicycles by themselves. So, you know, I want to have the confidence that they won't get lost, and that they will enjoy their journey on their own and be able to make it back to the meeting point at a certain time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And see, conversely, and I'm not going to hijack any more of this meeting, but I like a quiet corner. And so I get a little agoraphobia when I see all of that open plan. And I know it's very popular these days, but I do like to go into the library and find a corner. You're saying let's come, let's meet people. I don't. I like to go and get my book and go into a corner. But again, that could just be an oddity of mine, but just for the sake of conversation, I'll throw that out there.
Well, Yvonne, I want you to know that that's part of what's really important in the library experience. We spend a lot of time showing the other spaces, but knowing that there's still a lot of people that like a quiet place, it's very important in any library design. So there'll be a place for you. Any other comments?
I have a comment, but I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay. You talk about including access to new technologies. I'm still trying to come to terms with the old technologies. And so, for instance, I would love the libraries to have some, either a course or some individual help on, for instance, learning how to use Pages on an Apple computer so that I could word process more easily. I think that's rather old technology. I don't think that's exactly new.
I can throw a thought out, is that, you know, libraries have always very much recognized that their users come on a spectrum. You know, I have a daughter who's 25, and I feel like I'm somewhat technologically able, but when she's with me, she's like, Mom, come on, give me your phone, I'll do it, right? So So we always, as a library, understand that we have individuals that we serve that are on a spectrum. And so having the spaces so that we can have small, intimate classes so that, you know, people don't feel like they have to rush, that other people are passing them by, has always been one of our goals here. And we often teach technology classes of no more than 5 people so that we can go at everyone's pace. We offer a wide range of classes. And then sometimes, you know, we would like to offer a class that we can teach 20 people because everybody wants a quick down and dirty intro to Excel. So I think, you know, part of what we're looking for in New Space is to give us that ability to respond to all of our patrons' needs, because we want to meet people where they are. It's not our place to say, I can't believe you don't know Pages, because, you know, we all come to things at different points in our life. And I'm a whiz bang at Excel, but I don't do so. I wouldn't know where to start with Pages. So I think that's a really important thing to hear, that we have people that have a particular need and we want to meet it.
Thank you.
And I'll catch us up on notes in the chat from Chusri. I would like to see the elevator closer to the entrance so that parents and people could access the collection. And if some of these comments have just a quick reaction, I might mention that improved elevator access is a given that has been considered and budgeted for throughout the process. As we think about accessibility, accessibility certainly is for folks with disabilities, but that definition also includes folks who are more mobility impaired. It also includes parents with strollers needing to get to a different level. So a new elevator proximately located is a given. From Mary, technology isn't natural to me. That's why I do need technology classes and the technology lab, so I can do what needs to be done on computers nowadays. And second comment, I like the idea of a drive-up pickup, then don't need to look for parking. A drive-up has also been to date considered one of the givens of the project, both to offer that service that one would expect from a contemporary library and also to mitigate some of the need of parking on the site and allow for that quick in and out. And from David Rose, one important consideration is the addition of an odd chair or table amidst the stacks so patrons can sit down and read a book they're considering to read in a more secluded space. Will the Lake Forest Library be considering adding these kinds of spaces? Jane, in your planning work and working with Penelope on the program, would you like to take a shot at that one?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You know, those are the level of plan details that we haven't resolved yet. And so while we have some estimated numbers of things that we know we need to accommodate, where they are is completely up to all of us to decide. So it's often quite nice to have a small intimate seating area or a single chair in the stacks. First of all, you know, when you're in the shelving, sometimes you just want to sit down and really take a look at that book and browse it for a little while to find out whether that's something you want to take with you. So yes, having some of those individual seats to give you a little personal space or a moment is going to be very important. Those are simple details that if there are more of those ideas out there, we would certainly welcome to hear them. Any other comments?
We want more of you to hijack the meeting. The only the only bad comment in a meeting like this is none. So we welcome, you know, more feedback. Please don't be shy and speak up. All right, a couple notes from the chat from Melanie Rummel. I think one of your challenges is going to be integrating the old building with the new one. They should connect seamlessly so the old library doesn't just become an old museum. And from Angeli Fontana, what restoration, are you considering, what restoration is being planned for the rotunda? And David Barosh, are you considering an area for study carrels? I might share a little bit that combines the questions and comments from Melanie and from Angela that both have to do with the architecture of the building. You may have sensed from our presentation tonight that the team has some trepidation about the design, knowing that some earlier studies have been out in the community, caused concerns. And so we have to mention again that the team is committed to collaborating with the Historic Preservation Commission, bringing forth design alternatives that do integrate any new expansion and the existing building in a way that, through our team's expertise, follows the intent of the Lake Forest Historic Preservation Guidelines. Now, that'll be our starting point. And then vetting those through the HPC and having a dialogue of what is successful and what falls short will take us to our next steps. So we can't reiterate enough in these meetings that design ideas that have been out there in the community have been studies, either to test with our early discussions with the HPC or just to test building fit on the site. And I think the ask from the library and the design team is to allow the design to commence to show that there will be a collaboration and a commitment to work through the historical process.
Victor, if I'd just like to kind of circle that around, because we've had some questions about, is there going to be enough space in the building, right? So the original, I don't like to call it the old building, the original 1931 building, every bit of that space is going to be used. It's going to be used, refreshed, maybe some technology, like really modern technology, like grounded plugs will be added to some of those spaces so that they're usable. And so there's no concept here of any part of this building becoming a museum or a mausoleum. The front walk is being restored so that it continues to invite people up to the building to experience it like they did from 1931 to 1978. And so just, you know, the rotunda, the lovely Italian marble circulation desk will continue. We are hoping in a post-COVID world that we can take down the plexiglass, but the shelving and the ability to access, you know, featured materials or new materials, whatever the librarians decide should be in that space, that is all going to continue. So we can't afford not to use the space. So we will be using it, and we will be using it appropriately in the ways that it was intended to be used.
And Catherine, let me double back again to add some preservation language to that. Again, some are familiar with the Department of Interior Preservation Guidelines. And so to Angela's question, what restoration is planned in the rotunda? Space like that will be designated to be preserved and restored to what's called the period of historical significance. And so through archival research, the intent is to uncover to the best degree possible the original state of historic spaces in the library and the outside and restore them to the period of historical significance. So that will in fact be the guideline for the historical restoration. Then the same Department of Interior guidelines have rules of thumb for how historic buildings are expanded or added onto. Again, that would be a starting point for a design team. And then cities that have historically significant buildings and neighborhoods, such as Lake Forest, you have a Historic Preservation Commission, and that commission will be the steward, the custodian, to make sure that an expansion of a building maintains the integrity of the original. Couple more notes from the chat. What are the breadth of digital and remote resources? that will be expanded in the future to bring us into the modern age. From Mary, I like David Rose's idea of having a place to sit down and look at books where they are shelved, especially near new books. From Nancy Hensel, is there any monies earmarked in the capital improvement project to improve services for the west side of town? So 2 questions are included here: the breadth of digital and remote resources that will be expanded, and then monies earmarked for to improve services on the west side of town.
And we also had a question from David about, are you considering study carrels? So yes, I'll let Jane talk about study carrels. So I think the thinking with the spaces as we go forward is that we don't know what's going to happen in 25 years. We may not even need parking because all the cars will be self-parking, right? So, but on the inside, one of the challenges with the current building is that each space was built for one and only purpose. So as we think about those spaces going forward, as we think about updating them, as we think about adding new spaces, the goal is to build spaces that are flexible so that if the change happens, if children no longer come to the library, the children's space can be converted into the current, whatever the current generation's needs are. So that's how we think about planning for the future from a library perspective. The question from Nancy, I know the project funding at this point has been talked about philanthropic money for this particular site. The library put into its strategic plan a very specific direction. We have a number of trustees that we've been, that have been on the board for a long time, and we know that we need to do better on the west side. So we actually earmarked some money in the FY 2022 budget to start to address to come to understand what's going on from a service perspective and how to address it. And I know David Rose is on the library board and he is on tonight. David, do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I know, part of the challenge is geography. We know the cost of having an additional site. A branch library on the west side is probably cost prohibitive. But we also know that we have a 30-point gap between cards, library cards in the Ward 3 and Ward 4 versus Ward 1 and Ward 2. And that's troubling. It says that people have just decided not to sign up for the library. It's too long of a trip. It's too much of a hassle. I can't get my needs met. I'm not going to use the library in Lake Forest. I may use the library in Deerfield or in Vernon Hills or in Highland Park. And I think therein lies an opportunity to improve service. If I was able to perhaps get my holds at the West Lake Forest train station, kind of like as an Amazon locker, that might increase the likelihood of someone on the west side getting a card and using the library more frequently. Maybe they don't come in as frequently as someone on the east side, but they continue to use our services, and maybe they'll make that occasional trip to get something that they want to look for because we are helping meet the needs. And then secondly, we have most of our programming at the Lake Forest Library on the east side, the only site we have. We're exploring what would it take to do some of our programming at sites around the city with some of our partner institutions. Like if you were able to go to Ellowa Farms one evening to hear a program on something that might be, very germane to that location, or if you were able to do something maybe at Dickinson Hall or in Settler Square. So those are all things we're considering, and there'll be a whole group of people, both staff and trustees that study this next year. And hopefully we have new programs and strategies in place to address those issues.
All right, I want to make sure that we don't forget David's question about the study carrels. The study carrels, we know that right now there are study carrels, and there's some very loyal users of those study carrels in the art room. And so right now they are in the program because we did a careful inventory of what was currently in the library and how it was being used. And so once we go through the design process and begin the formal planning process, we'll be including a wide variety of furnishings in those spaces as well. And those decisions will be finalized during the furniture selection process. So right now there's a lot of seating, and we know they're heavily used. So I would imagine that they will be in the planning process, at least at the start, right? But none of those decisions have been made yet.
And doubling back on some comments in the chat from Rami Lopat, says technology exists at Lake Forest College and the amazing lab at Lake Forest High School. What do they have that the library doesn't need to have? Do you know yet? Also, could the tech lab be a standalone building, either on site, northeast corner, or off site, say West High School or hospital campus? What are the issues? A lot of questions there. A couple of them I could tackle, a couple of them I may not have the answer to. Our scope has been to study opportunities on site at the current location of Lake Forest Library and the opportunities there on site. Knowing every foot of that site somewhat intimately, depending on the size, there likely is just simply not the room at the northeast corner to build a freestanding structure. That's not, it couldn't be tested, but it's likely too small of an area. Regarding shared resources at other facilities, at a high level, I can say that library leaders have been talking to community partners to collaborate on resources and facilities that might be shared, so there are not redundancies for what I would call specialty areas. For example, we know that there is a recording studio available at another facility, so that would not be duplicated at the library. Other technologies which have patron demand at all of these locations, including the library, would also occur in the library as well. And I don't know, Catherine, if you want to expand on that.
I'm going to ask Ed Finn, who's my Director of Operations, to just take this question. He has a lot of experience on this topic, intimately familiar also with what's available at Lake Forest College. So Ed, it's your question to answer.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. And I think one thing, and Victor alluded to this in his comments, the way we collaborate with other institutions and the way we approach lifelong learning, I think all of these institutions build on one another. The library is in a unique space to be open to everyone. So Lake Forest College has a lot of wonderful technologies. They have resin 3D printers, and they have a lot of different things that are really, really cool and available to college students. But there's also the opportunity to think about making as an activity that the whole family can enjoy. So when people are in the library together, they can explore together, they can do different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be driven by technology, but the library right now doesn't really live in that space. And we really have an opportunity to do that. And we have some great partners in the community to help us explore what that would look like. So I think that that's where the value add really comes in.
Thanks, Ed. Next comment from the chat, from Melanie Rummel. Will the translucent glass stairs be recreated? I recall them well, but I'm not sure if they were original to the building. the upstairs hallways in the stacks were the same as I recall. So Melanie, I have to confess that I don't recall seeing translucent glass stairs in the archival imagery or limited drawings we've been able to uncover for the original building. So hearing your comment, we will dig into that deeper. If we're talking about the current stairs that access the adult collection stacks in the center of the building, those stairs below the skylight and the structure that holds up those stacks is not original to the building. And that is an opportunity to make that area much more open and accessible and welcoming and easier to find for patrons. But I will have to do a second look to see if there were translucent stairs in the original building. Thank you for asking that.
All right. Anything else? We're almost at time for tonight and want to make sure that if there's anything else you really came to make sure that we hear, that if it didn't fit into a question, we still want to make sure that you get a chance to tell us. Any parting comment from anyone? Okay.
I'll wrap it up. So thank you so much to Jane and Victor, and thank you everyone from the community who came tonight. Just a reminder, there's a couple of steps. Feel free to reach out to the library, your alderman, to continue the conversation with us. We come to work in this building every day, and we talk to people, but we may not hear your point of view. So please do that. Again, remember the survey will be coming out at the conclusion of these sessions next week. So watch for that. If you don't see it, contact us. If you'd like a tour, if you'd like to see ideas or what we're thinking about in particular spaces, please do call me and we will get that set up. You can also go again to our website, the project page, and there's a couple of boxes there, one to sign up for a tour, one to leave us a comment, and two just to sign up to say, if there's any news about the project, send it to me. And we send out those things. So thank you again. Greatly appreciate everyone's taking the time out of their very, very busy schedules to come to and talk to us this evening. So have a good evening and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.